Oosh.
Hello, welcome to Planet's FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj,
And my name is James.
and let me take you back, way back, James. Today is Throwback Thursday. It's a Thursday before the 4-day Easter weekend, so you get the opportunity to spend it at home.
And you should be spending it at home with
Indeed.
Easter eggs delivered by Amazon or something.
Yeah, eat as much chocolate as you possibly maybe want. Honestly, I had to pop into the supermarket the other day. There's some good deals to be had on Easter eggs, mate. If they covered all of the food groups, we'd be eating for very cheap right now. Unfortunately, they do not. So yeah, Throwback Thursday, and we're going back today to 1994 and the lead up to England's failed qualification campaign for the USA World Cup.
Yeah, got my colours on.
Mm-hmm.
Brutal, mate. It was a shitty time to be an England fan off the back of obviously great success of Italia 90, and then a lot of that team kind of fell away. The likes of Shilton, Butcher, Mark Wright,
Lineker.
Chris Waddle, for whatever reason, wasn't involved. Gary Lineker went after Euro 92. It became a very different England team. I'd ask anybody to look at the England team that played in Sweden against Sweden in Euro 92, and you would just go, oh my gosh, how bad was it? Like David Batty at right back, Lee Sharp, Neil Webb,
I mean,
Colton
you look
Palmer,
at
so
Carlton
bad.
Palmer, Andy Sinton was getting England.
Andy Sinton played in that fixture, yeah.
I mean, you're thinking, nah. I mean, Carlton Palmer had his attributes. He wasn't a bad player, but you wouldn't think that he was England's standard. But coming back to, I mean, you said, yeah, after the success of Italia 90, I think nowadays we breeze through qualifying so easily. It's almost as if we don't have a 100% record in qualifying, it's a failure more often than not. Back then, it wasn't perhaps as easy as you'd think. Some of the teams that were around at the time were pretty decent, but I remember Italia 90 watching football. I was 10 at the time. You'd have been even younger. Watching it with my parents, who don't know anything or care anything about football. But World Cup is always one of those where everybody comes out the woodwork and likes to watch football. And sitting up late watching the Cameroon game and what have you, the West Germany game, and you'd think you'd want to kick on from that to build for something for the USA World Cup, and that's just not how it happened, was it?
Couldn't have really come at a worse time for the England national team as well, being that essentially it was right at the beginning of the Premier League boom as well. So it had gone from all this national euphoria from Italia 90 to then 92 was disappointing. The Premier League launched, and then the World Cup being in America was obviously going to be such a big thing. The fact that they were essentially a very unfashionable soccer team at the time. And it was just a catastrophe that England didn't make it. It's interesting what you say about the group that we had. The qualifying group is still a qualifying group that we should have gone out of. But
Of course.
We would never get a qualifying group like that now. Impossible. No. Because 5 of the 6 teams that we got in that group would all be seeded no worse than like 3rd seeds. And the majority would be sort of probably 2nd seeds.
Yep.
So it was a brutal group, but there's no way that we shouldn't have been qualifying and
winning
half our fixtures.
You mentioned some of the dross that had managed to get into the England squad. You still had a back. You had Seaman at the back. You still had Adams. Pallister was still playing. Gaza was still playing. Sheringham, Shearer coming through. Merson. These are all international standard players. David Platt and what have you. Those guys would have been able to carry the odd player that maybe wasn't good enough. So you're right, we should have qualified and we should have gone to USA 1994. But then, I mean, John Barnes, even though he was getting a lot of stick at the time, I wonder what happened. Is it a case of complacency, which we get accused of quite regularly?
My memories of it were, I mean, this campaign I'd have been like 9 or something. So memories are a little sketchy, but it's when I really started watching like every single game going. Yeah. And the major criticism of England through the media, etc., was that it was very, very 4-4-2, quite one-dimensional in terms of, you know, bypassing the midfield, which seems odd when we had good midfield players like Ince, Gascoigne, Platt,
Yep.
that was the central midfield three that played against Germany in Euro 96, like 3 years later. So they weren't bad players, just weren't used properly. Taylor could, bless his soul, obviously Graham Taylor lost his life 3 years ago. But he just couldn't get the best out of Gascoigne for one. You watched that that documentary that I think was on Channel 4 from the 90s, which I watched back a few nights ago. And you just felt like he was so frustrated with Gascoigne. He just couldn't. But all Gascoigne needed to be told was, Paul, you're the best player on the pitch. Go and show everyone you're the best player on the pitch.
Yep.
And occasionally he did, like in the Turkey home qualifier, he was outstanding. He scored a brilliant header in the away qualifier against Turkey. Played well at home to Poland. He was unfortunately got injured in the first game with Holland, then was suspended for the second game.
He got injured. He got clattered, mate. That was a bit.
Well, yeah, a little bit naughty. And in Oslo, he was basically a passenger when England lost in Norway. Should we take a journey, Suj, through the campaign a little bit?
Let's do it. I mean, there were some games that we can fly through quickly, and there were probably, as with all campaigns, right, there's one or two that were the pivotal kind of turning point type games that made a big impact versus all of the others, because there were games in amongst that campaign that England won comfortably enough.
Yeah, but the problem is we won 5 games, mate. 2 of them against San Marino, 2 of them against a very poor Turkey side who nobody would have envisaged at that point would go on and finish like third in 2002, less than 10 years later. Nobody would have envisaged that. So the campaign began. England played all their games at Wembley. I think it was only the Holland game was a sellout. It was probably 3/5 full when we hosted a Norway side who weren't fancy to do anything, but had already won, by the time England played them, had already won 3 qualifiers. Had played San Marino home and away, won 12-0 over the 2 games, and had also beat the Dutch at home, so shouldn't have been underestimated. On this particular night, England were unlucky. Scored early in the first half through a David Platt goal from an in-swinging Stuart Pearce free kick. And Rekdal scored an absolute screamer of an equaliser for Norway. And from what should have been a routine win from actually performance, it turned hostile quickly to being, you failed again at Wembley off the back of a disastrous European Championships in the summer previously. And then instantly put yourselves under pressure. There were home victories that followed that after Wembley. Gascoigne, as I said earlier, was fantastic in a 4-0 win against Turkey. Then there was 6 against San Marino, and they all got booed off. There's one we talked about in the racism pod, wasn't it? About huge John Barnes got during that game, which was disgusting. It was even despite a 6-0 win, the football that England produced on that evening was pretty shocking. Taylor said himself during the game, didn't he? It's only going to be judged on goals. And there's the famous clip of him not being happy about Colton Palmer being in the box when he scored England's 5th.
I told him to hold the middle of the park. If that, I couldn't figure out if he was joking, but if he genuinely told Colton Palmer to hold the middle of the pitch against San Marino at home, then there's something wrong. But yeah, you're talking about booing. I suppose it's because we say it's 6-0, like the 4 of the goals came in the last 25 minutes or so. So it was only 2-0 going 65 minutes. Then what's going on. And then, you're going to get a late flurry against a team like San Marino when fitness kind of comes to the fore. So I think the 2-0 at 65 minutes is more telling than the 6-0 overall. Yeah.
David Platt was probably England's best player throughout the campaign, got 4 of the goals. Les Ferdinand added a late 6th very late on. And then there was another fairly routine victory in the return with Turkey. Platt scored again, and so did Gascoigne in a 2-0 victory. So, all right, we played 4 games. We played the weakest team and battered them. We played an underwhelming Turkey, beat them home and away, and obviously drawn at home to Norway. It wasn't a disaster at this point because remember, the main competitor in the group would have been Holland, and it's worth saying that the top 2 qualified.
Yep.
So you're only thinking, well, we've got to stick in with Holland, and Holland already lost in Norway. So in theory, they were at this point in a worse position than us when Holland came to Wembley. And within a minute, we're winning. John Barnes scores a fantastic free kick. About 20-odd minutes later, Les Ferdinand hit the post and David Platt put the rebound away. and Wembley's jumping and everything's rosy. And then Bergkamp produces a moment of absolute magic with a beautiful finish. And Holland got the draw, which by the end they thoroughly deserved. Very famous clip of Mark Overmars absolutely blitzing Des Walker and Des Walker hauling him down. Yep. In fact, it's interesting listening back to the commentary of it now, and they're all like, "Oh, the shirt pull started outside the area." Yeah. So biased. But when trust me, when Overmars gets in the box, Walker is still yanking the hell out of him. But it started outside the box. You're like, how blinkered are you?
I mean, to be fair, we both watched a few highlights and reruns of these. And I couldn't help on a number of occasions just thinking about VAR now. Like, you come back to the Koeman.
We'll get on to that,
later, and some dodgy tackles along the way, and inside the box, outside the box, last man. VAR would have had a nightmare back then in the 90s, mate. They'd be going to VAR every 5 minutes.
Yeah. One of the things that Taylor was particularly unfortunate about with this campaign was injuries. Alan Shearer suffered injuries through long periods, and there was a crop of really good English forwards like Les Ferdinand, Ian Wright, Teddy Sheringham. But basically all three of them were unproven for England. And he was dipping in and out. He couldn't decide on the right two that he wanted. He went to Poland. Ian Wright saved England late on, came on and scored in a fixture where Gascoigne was still having to wear a mask from that broken cheekbone he suffered in the Holland fixture a month earlier. And Gascoigne just wasn't fit, mate. They kicked him off the park. And it was a lot easier to do that. It was interesting watching that documentary back and seeing how bad the conditions were in Poland and how unplanned it was. Like, they had a training session which was meant to be behind closed doors. The pitch hadn't been cut and nobody locked the gates. So there was like 200 school kids in there just trying to completely curtail this training session in Poland. So they just like gave up on it.
Yep.
So scraped the draw there, but it wasn't a complete disaster to lose in Poland. It's always a difficult place to go. But then England had to get something in Norway. Taylor described it himself as must not lose. And England, it's one of the most shocking England performances ever. He decided randomly, from very much being a 4-4-2 / in certain cases 4-4-1-1 manager, decided to play three at the back with Lee Sharp and Lee Dixon as the wing backs. And the team on paper wasn't that bad, mate. Like, Gascoigne and Ince was in it. He still had Adams, Pallister, Walker at the back. He was Ferdinand and Sheringham up front, I think.
Seaman in goal.
Ian Wright had, Chris Woods was in goal, which was Chris basically the last time. Chris Woods wasn't great, particularly for the second goal. So the team was still all right, but Norway made it like a Premier League match, which at the time should have suited England and their trades, but they were just so much better in terms of their use of the ball higher up the pitch. And they scored either side of half-time through two familiar names to Premier League people. Even Leonardson bundled home the first of Spurs, Liverpool, Wimbledon and others. And Lars Bohinen remembered mostly for his time at Blackburn. I think this performance basically got him that move. Scored the second at the near post, and Woods should have done a lot better. David Seaman would obviously come into the team in the months following that. Basically Woods' last call as England goalkeeper. So now suddenly you've played Holland and drawn, Poland and drawn, and Norway and lost, and we're in trouble. Norway then got the draw away to Holland as well, which basically kind of sealed one of the top two places for them, basically made them safe.
I mean, it's interesting. England is still unbeaten at this point, apart from the one defeat against Norway. They went into the Norway game unbeaten. It was the draws that ended up being the downfall more than losing too many games.
Well, the draws didn't actually matter that much because, unbelievably, unlike the majority of the rest of football changed, or certainly the Premier League had, it was only 2 points for a win still in its qualifying campaign. It wasn't. So draws away from home, you weren't losing out on 2 points. You were only losing out on the one if you got a draw. So it was more than acceptable to be drawing some of these games away from home. The killer, really, in hindsight, was the home draws with Norway and Holland, because if you win those two, you go through. Your away results, even a defeat in Norway, it wouldn't have mattered if England had done the business at Wembley. And it wasn't just the qualifying campaign that caused major condemnation across the English media. You got to remember, very unfortunately at this time, Graham Taylor's being bashed around with turnip images and the whatnots, the sort of thing that, like, it's almost, it was accepted at the time. It was I don't know, like bullying basically, isn't it? Yeah,
it was. That was
just
probably
couldn't happen now.
Yeah, the Sun and the Mirror were at their worst, possibly around that time. Then maybe they even got worse, actually, to be honest. But it was anything goes at that time. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, I was reading when Taylor passed in 2017, and the Sun put their headline on the back page, like, "Do I not like that?" which was the famous comment that he made when it was lost in Rotterdam. And the amount of abuse they got back on that in terms of, oh, it's all right now, 25 years later after you hung the man out to dry.
Yeah.
The majority of football fans did want Taylor out. And I think the herd mentality of the early 90s compared to the world we know now with social media, etc., are two completely different places. If the back page of the national newspaper put on a headline like that, that was most people's news source, mate. So it went, and then people were walking around saying, oh, you know, turnip and all the rest of it.
I think Graham Taylor made the point when he was on the bench in one of the videos going back that a lot of the abuse that John Barnes was getting was as a result of negative stories in the Sun and the Mirror and what have you at the time. Because he was pilloried in the papers, it ended up bleeding onto the terraces and what have you, that he was getting a lot of stick when he was playing as well. So you're right. I mean, the papers had a lot of influence over what people were thinking and the type of abuse or not that they were given to players.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was going to say, the mood didn't help following that Norway fixture because, well, Norway were holding Holland, which wasn't actually a bad result for England's point of view from this point. On the same day, England began a 14 tournament in the United States of America as their kind of tester, pre-Confederations Cup and all that kind of thing. And they invited 3 of the world best to take part in a 14 tournament. They invited, obviously, Germany, Brazil, and England for some reason. And England's got a creditable draw against Brazil, lost against Germany, but in the first of their 3 games were humbled 2-0 by the United States of America, which you wasn't allowed to lose to them, basically.
No.
Just wasn't. And yeah, England lost 2-0 in Boston. And you think, oh, we're going to get away from this qualifying period, get a bit of sun and play a 10-day tournament away from home in the States, get ready for the tournament next year. It just made things worse.
Yeah.
But then there was kind of the recovery where the nation really got behind the team for the home fixture with Poland in September. Because from going from this is shit, it was like, okay, right, well, we need to get behind the team because we do need to qualify.
Because 2 wins would still take us through.
Yes, basically, as long as one of those was the Holland win, basically. I think even a draw in Holland would have been all right, but we had to win the Poland game, and we did, and it was the best performance of the qualifying campaign. We won 3-0. It helps that England scored really early. Les Ferdinand scored a lovely goal. Gascoigne got a great second goal, and Stuart Pearce scored a thumping free kick for the third, which you could see from that documentary. It was something that they'd worked on in terms of the shift in the ball and Pearce firing around the outside of the wall. And Taylor sat high in the stands. It was like he was detached, I felt. He was always a manager that was on the bench with his 2 lieutenants, Phil Neal and Laurie McMenemy, who, to me, looking back on it, they were just yes men for him, weren't they? It didn't look like they were adding anything, although Laurie McMenemy had been quite a decent manager at Southampton and others. And then, obviously, a month later came that pivotal game in Rotterdam. And it didn't help that England, as I said, had Gascoigne suspended, Shearer and many others injured, and didn't have. It was far from their best available 11, put it that way. But my God, did everything transpire against them in that fixture? And I didn't realise that. I just remember it as England going there and being shit.
Not a chance. England weren't bad that day, I don't think at all. You go into that game knowing if you get a draw, well, the likelihood is we're going to beat San Marino in the final game. I say the likelihood. If they didn't beat San Marino, they didn't deserve to go to the World Cup, let's be honest. So you go in there knowing we draw this, we come out with a draw away at Holland, we're gonna go to the World Cup. Watching the highlights of that game, it was a good game of football, end to end, a lot of chances. There'd been 9-10 chances whilst I was watching the highlights, and then I looked at the clock and it was like 27 minutes or something. I was like, oh, wow. I thought we were into the second half at this point. But it was a real end-to-end game of football. I think a lot of England's early chances were long-range efforts and outside the box, but they did kind of grow into the game a little better.
Yeah, Platt, Tony Adams had great chances in the first half. Paul Merson had a lovely little run and shot wide.
Yeah,
Holland,
they were all still long-range efforts.
Holland had their chances too, and what's really important to say here to sort of balance the story and not just bash this kind of Taylor campaign of England's is this was a brilliant Holland team. A Holland team that had been favourites at the previous year's Euros, lost in the semi-finals to Denmark on penalties inexplicably after destroying Germany 3-1 in the group stage.
That's John Jensen's rise to then get to Arsenal, right?
Yeah, well, obviously he scored in the final against Germany following that semi-final. But this Holland team had the De Boer brothers, Rijkaard, Bergkamp. I mean, Ruud Gullit didn't play on this evening. I'm not sure if he might have retired from Holland, possibly.
Overmars.
Overmars.
Ed de Hoy is a good goalkeeper.
Yeah, they had Vitschka. They had a top team. A lot of the younger players went on to win the European Cup with Ajax a few years later. And when they got to the World Cup and played Brazil in the quarterfinals, people might remember the Bebeto baby celebration and that. People were calling it the final before that game. People thought Holland-Brazil was going to be like the dream final, and Brazil edged them out 3-2.
Yeah, Bergkamp was getting to the peak of his powers at the time, wasn't he, really?
Yeah.
Very, very
absolutely.
At the time.
He was the attacking star of quality around this team. There was one brilliant one-touch play he had late in the second half when, in between the first and the second goals, when Rijkaard should have scored the rebound. Saying everything went against England, Rijkaard had a goal disallowed late in the first half, which was clearly onside. And I had no recollection of this at all. You only remember the incident that happened 10 minutes into the second half.
Yeah. I would say clearly offside. I think that's one where the commentary was pretty honest, and he was onside. He timed his run.
It was a bit apologetic. I think it was Brian Moore was on the commentary. The game must have been on ITV.
Atkinson.
Yeah. And Brian Moore was really apologetic about it. He's like, it's a bit onside there. Because commentary was so biased, and it still is. It really does my head in, actually, when you watch England in major tournaments. And I just want them to call the game of football. I understand these people might be English and they're passionate and want them to win. When England score, you don't hear them shouting goal into the mics, do you?
No.
So you don't have to lie. Tell the football matches you see. It really annoys me. You used to get people's backs up, particularly I think in the late 90s when United were constantly going for the European Cup. The whole country's behind Manchester United. No, we're not. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? The days of always support. And it was the case. I know Spurs fans who would have wanted Arsenal to do well in Europe in the 60s, 70s and vice versa. Those eras had completely gone. It was only talking about, we talked about Norwich City last week. When a club like that got in, you wanted them to do well. But you didn't really want United's, Liverpool's, Arsenal's doing well. Not those who were competing as other big clubs anyway. Generally, you wanted them to go out. So you'd hear this commentary going, all of Britain's behind. No, mate, we're not. Although we obviously all would have been behind England that night in Holland. The key incident comes just before the hour mark, where England typically play some beautiful football. The ball gets fed into Shearer and it goes out to the right. And I think it's Andy Sinton who just launches it about 80 yards in the air. Yeah. And for whatever reason, the Holland backline just stops and Platt runs through. Yeah. And he's clear one-on-one on goal. And it's very comparable to the Des Walker Overmars incident, but there's a major difference. Koeman is the only one running back at him, and David Platt is absolutely central one-on-one. Yep. He gets clearly pulled back. It's unquestionable, no arguments. Probably just outside the area on this occasion. I think he's right. Yeah, I don't think it was a penalty. But originally a penalty was given. I'll tell you how you can know this as well, is the referee runs into the penalty box and then comes back out. When you listen back to the commentary, they can't tell what's been given.
No, you're right.
The referee runs into the penalty area and then points back. Why would he do that? So he was going to give the penalty, changed his mind, But
I
more
think
to
the
the point
lino may
was
have had some influence in that.
possibly
or possibly
more.
yeah.
And to be fair, if the lino's given that information, he was right, because the
It
original
was
call
just outside.
was outside. This wasn't quite like the Des Walker and Overmars one where he just kept pulling him. Koeman gave him one pull and he went down, so it was just outside. But the fact that he didn't get sent off was absolutely inexplicable.
No,
It's the
last
clearest
man,
red card you will ever see.
Yeah.
And this was a rule that had got brought into football quite recently before that to stop this sort of thing happening. Was if you're denying a clear goal scoring opportunity, basically a one-on-one was how they defined it then, you are getting sent off to stop exactly that sort of incident happening. It should have been a red card then. It would be a red card now. I mean, 100% it would be a red card now. Nothing would be any different. But he got away with it. England didn't score from the free kick. And 3 minutes later, Holland get their own one on the edge of the other end, and Koeman scores.
Well, it wasn't quite as easy as Koeman scores, right? Because they lined up again. It was as close to the edge of the box as you could possibly be, and England line up the wall. You could tell from the commentators that there was no question that Koeman was going to take it. So he's strolling up, and it is that ominous. This is just written, isn't it? So he gets to take the first free kick, and hits Paul Ince, who's done a great job of charging out from the wall to close it down, but he's just gone a little bit too early. So you're thinking, all right, danger over. Oh, wait, hang on a second. Danger not over. And you're thinking, right, okay, here we go again. It's all set up. Some of these stories just get written, right? And he's going to flick it.
Yeah, and he did.
He's flicked it, and that was that.
Yeah, Dave Seaman gave himself way too much to do, didn't he? He was
I
practically hugging the other post.
It was in the top corner, but he didn't hit it with any kind of pace or power. It was a little dink that you'd think if Seaman was a little bit further across, because of the pace of the free kick, he may have stood a chance of getting to the ball.
If there was a criticism of David Seaman, and I'd say he's probably the best English goalkeeper I've seen in my time of the 30-odd years I've gone. If there was a criticism of him, if you look back at errors in his game, they all come from moving his feet. Like, when we started saying that about Joe Hart, he just can't move his feet anymore. It's not even a hand problem. He can't move his feet anymore. David Seaman, in certain games, you think this one, and both goals, the second goal with Bergkamp as well, he doesn't move his feet quick enough. And then really goalkeepers would tell you he goes to save it with his wrong hand. You think Naeem in Paris in 1995, Ronaldinho in Japan in 2002.
Got caught.
These are all errors where, for whatever reason, I don't know, like he's frozen in a moment and he just can't move his feet in time.
He got caught out positionally, but then couldn't adjust himself quick enough to recover, basically, and that was that.
I think, like, say that one, like Koeman, the Koeman goal where he clips it over the wall, it's a sort of one, actually. And the reason I always highlighted Joe Hart is because Joe Hart used to be so quick. I think like a peak Joe Hart actually would have got there, or a peak David James who had a bit more agility. Seaman didn't really ever have that agility, but he was an outstanding goalkeeper, and it's not to hang him out to blame, because minutes later he makes an astonishing double save from Bergkamp and Rijkaard. And it's kind of a frantic 10-minute period in between the first and Bergkamp's second goal for Holland on the night, because England have another free kick on the edge of the box, and Paul Merson takes a weldy, and it looks like it's in, and it hits the inside of the post and comes out across the line. You just think, not going to be our night. And then Bergkamp scores, if you ignore the goalkeeping mistake, and I think it was, from his perspective, was a great goal for Holland's second.
It's still
goal.
Well outside the box.
And it's finished.
Corner. So it's hard to... Yeah, you could blame the goalkeeper, but he still had to put it in the bottom corner.
I just think, and maybe it's my memories of David Seaman, that every time I see that goal, more the Bergkamp goal than the Koeman goal, because the Koeman goal gives himself too much to do, in my opinion. But the Bergkamp goal, I just always think he'll save it. I'm watching it back, and I don't understand how he's got. You wouldn't call it an error. It's a positional, and he just doesn't move quick enough. Basically, that one's not where he's been caught out positionally. It's a really strange one. It was a top goalkeeper, David Seaman. It's not him to blame. And don't forget, this is one of his first real games for England as well, following basically getting the shirt ahead of Chris Woods. And then we're out.
And that was that, right?
That was it. Well, we still had a chance to go through.
Yeah, if Poland beat Holland. But
we had to hope Poland beat Holland, and England had to win 7-0 in Bologna, where the game was played against San Marino. And 13 seconds in, was it? I don't think it was that. Was it 9 or 10 seconds?
It was quick.
David Guidetti, who is now a salesman.
Gualtieri.
He's a computer salesman. Scored for San Marino. Unbelievable. And I think every English fan who watched that at that moment probably just fell about laughing.
Raging.
It was.
I don't know. I think it was raging, to be honest with you.
No, I think what could you do? What could you do but laugh? You would have just go, well, we need 8 now. Oh, we still need Poland to win as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, Holland won fairly comfortably, 3-1 in Poland. So it didn't really matter. England got their 7 goals, but would have needed an 8th had Poland beat Holland. But the damage was already done. What's interesting about it is, actually, on reflection, how different English football may have been had England made it. Because the chances are that if England had qualified, it would have been a bit of a disaster because it wasn't a great side. And then obviously on the back of this, Taylor has to go. He would probably have said that himself, as much as he didn't want to. He did resign. And then we get Venables and we get a different brand of football in Euro 96.
Yeah.
And the landscape of English football looked very different. It was only really once we had Venables and Hoddle that English fans began to buy into an idea of, okay, we can play football stylistically. Think of the way England played when they beat Holland 4-1, and then there was some very good performances under Hoddle as well. Think the 0-0 in Rome when Ian Wright should have won the game for England. Taylor's sides wouldn't have survived that. To think of Graham Taylor as England manager in Euro 96, for me, I feel bad because what he did at, say, Watford, Villa, etc., so historic, but it just didn't work as England manager.
No,
and I think Euro 96 wouldn't have been what we remember it so greatly for if he'd still been in charge.
For Dylan Skinner, surely that's what we remember it for, isn't it? More than anything else.
If you say so, boss.
I just think, yeah, you're right. You hit the nail on the head there. I find with managers and clubs, so many managers have done the merry-go-round. We've spoken about some in quizzes that we've had, and the likes of Ian Holloway and Pulis and Allardyce, they've been to so many clubs. I don't think it's ever a case of they're good managers or they're bad managers. It's the timing of the players, the club, and the manager has to fit together. You get the right players with the right manager, and I suppose that's why so many do the merry-go-round until it fits, and when it does, you get 5-10 years of decent performance. I mean, Moyes had a great stint at Everton. Right? He was really good there because it all came together. This is an example where perhaps that England squad and Graham Taylor didn't particularly go together. The sense I got from the training squad videos and what you could see behind the scenes was that the likes of Gascoigne and some of the younger ones coming through, who Sheringham and what have you were at the time, were Billy Big Bollocks before. They were larger-than-life characters that liked to joke around and perhaps were a little bit dominant in there. And Graham Taylor wasn't going to keep control of that dressing room, perhaps.
Yeah, difficult to say he might not have had the respect that Bobby Robson had. And it should be pointed out that going into Italia 90, a lot of people couldn't wait for Robson to leave the England job. And then obviously Italia 90 with Gascoigne and all that went so well that people were then suddenly in regret.
Yep.
And Taylor had a very good spell, obviously at Watford and then at Aston Villa in the late 80s, which is obviously what got him the job. And he was probably the popular choice at the time in terms of effectiveness, winning football, etc. Watford were obviously a very, let's say, unestablished club who he did incredibly well with. They finished like second in the league. It's the same with Villa, I think. So he was on the edge, with clubs that you wouldn't have expected it from. So he had every right to be put forward for that job. As I said on our pod on Tuesday, probably Howard Kendall was probably the main other choice. But Taylor got the job, rightly so. The thing is, you can say players at the time, it wasn't right, etc. But we talked about, say, Colton Palmer. For me, he was average. He got in there because he was the sort of player Taylor liked, was athletic, could go box to box. He could kick it and edit. If you go back to that England's team and midfield and you go Batty, who was a good holding midfield player, obviously won the title with Leeds in 92, an emerging Paul Ince at Manchester United, Gascoigne, David Platt were both playing at the top of Serie A. So there wasn't actually problems in centre midfield. And as I said, you then had the likes of Wright, Ferdinand, Shearer, Sheringham all emerging together. Andy Cole could have been another
Gaza.
one. Paul Merson was young. Lee Sharp was young. So it wasn't like England didn't have players. And then you still got like the Arsenal backline to choose from. Lee Dixon and Tony Adams played regularly.
Yep.
Des Walker, who was having a bad time of it, really suffered when he went to Sampdoria. And then when he came back to Sheffield Wednesday, wasn't quite
Stuart Pearce, solid left back.
Forest. Stuart Pearce. Tony DeRigo was an excellent understudy left back. He played in Rotterdam. Gary Pallister. Well. And they're a choice of goalkeepers with like Woods, David Seaman, Tim Flowers. So I don't buy into the theory that England didn't have the players at that time.
Agree with you, 100%.
You look at that England team that lost to Sweden in '92 and that midfield, and you just go, how did it get to that point? I know obviously Gascoigne was injured, but why was it so bad?
Dark days. I think it's a nice sunny day outside and we've just lowered everybody's tone.
Well, no, I think...
But you think we came out of the back of it and since then, I mean, we've had very little problems in any qualification getting to any major tournaments. You
say that, but I think because of what happened in Rotterdam is what made people so nervous about Rome in 1997 and also in Turkey in 2003 before the Euros there as well. Remember that battle in Istanbul was fun.
Yep.
So because of that in Rotterdam, it took away it will be all right for England. I mean,
I suppose at some point we have started realising that, we're not the best in the world. We haven't won an international tournament for 50 odd years and so on and so on. I think that arrogance and assumption that it will be all right has definitely gone now.
And of course, to finish fourth in a World Cup and then not qualify for European Championships, it has happened to others. I think it happened to Holland as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
But it was unthinkable to, even with what did look on paper quite a difficult group, it was unthinkable for England not to be one of those top two sides.
And thinking back, it was fine margins. Like that penalty, Koeman gets sent off. The game could have been completely different. The width of the post for Merson, and we get a draw, could have been completely different. Yes, we gave ourselves too much to do by having to get something out of that game. We should have picked up points earlier in the group, but it wasn't all. We did still have a chance all the way right up to pretty much the very end, and it was just that one game.
Rekdal's screamer for Norway, Des Walker putting over Mars.
Yeah,
there were things that happened long before England lost in Rotterdam that caused them with too much to do.
Exactly. That was fun thinking back to those players, having a look back to 1994.
Maybe we'll do something a bit more England fun in the coming weeks.
Maybe even 96, bit of dentist chair. You can spray me, I'll spray you with Lucozade or whatever we can get our hands.
What about a Euro 96 quiz?
Yeah, I'd be up for that. I'll be well up for that.
Lock it in.
So, as James has alluded, maybe the quiz next week might be Euro 96. It probably won't be because we don't want to give you guys a chance to swat up and then put me to shame by getting 20 out of 20. We still got a little bit of content left this week. Predominantly, it will all be James. He is coming at you tomorrow with an Ask James live stream. I assume you're not taking Good Friday off?
No, buttocks.
The man doesn't rest. Honestly, during this break and this lockdown, James has been busting his balls to get content out in the live streams, the Champ Manager stuff on Wednesdays and Saturdays. I'm not going to say it's committed to every Wednesday and every Saturday, but you've been busting those out and the live streams on Fridays as well. So make sure whatever you do, if you follow James's account on Twitter at Planet FPL Pod, get the little bell, ring that bell, and you'll get alerted anytime he's going live or we put any content out. And do the same on YouTube, youtube.com/Planet FPL. If you ring the bell when we go live or any of our videos go out, you'll get informed straight away because regardless of lockdown, regardless of Easter, the content is still going to keep coming.
Yeah, I've got 3 guest appearances lined up as well. One I can reveal is I'm going to be on FPL Family with Lee and Sam on Sunday night talking about Champions League from last season. The other 2 I have to keep quiet about, apparently.
Okay, yep. We've still got the main pod next week for you. We're going to do another people's poll, which James will release on Sunday. and give you a chance to vote on a topic that we'll look into in a little bit more detail. And then we'll have the quiz on Wednesday, another throwback next Thursday, more live streaming, and a little bit of Champ Manager chucked in here and there as well, because that game is gathering some steam. And I took a 4-point hit yesterday that paid off with a plus 23.
Nice.
That's good. Canute and Unsworth for Rob Lee, Saha, and Judas Campbell. So, yeah, quids in, mate.
They know because I told everyone on the stream. Who was your vice captain?
Juan Sebastian Veron.
Oh, so that didn't work out too bad because you captained Hasselbank, didn't
Back
you?
in the game, I'm probably in the top 1,000 now. So, honestly, to be honest, yesterday I spent some time looking into it, and I feel like I got my head around it a little bit more on what's going on. I got the alerts on the Champ Manager Twitter account, so the goals were coming through as well as they were coming through. So, yeah, I'm coming for you. I probably not, but I'm going to. There we go.
We all want to see you try, though, mate. We all want to see you try.
Yeah, for sure.
It was amazing to see them featured on an article on the BBC's website this morning. How cool is that?
Without doubt.
Brilliant.
They deserve it, mate. Setting that up's hard work. So, kudos and credit.
Dave at Simple Goals said he tried to get us in the article as well, but they didn't put us in. Bastards.
Oh, fantastic. Really good stuff. So everybody that does tweet at us, interact with us, thank you so much for your support. Do like and share the podcast with all your football-loving, FPL-playing friends. We'll be back at you. James will be back at you tomorrow. We'll all be back at you next week. Have a fantastic Easter weekend. Make use of the good weather if you can with a garden, or get outside and get some fresh air for your exercise. But most importantly, stay safe, and we will see you next week. Ciao for now.
Be nice to each other. Cue music, man, child.
Oh.